DreAllDay.com.
You are now tuned in to the show where you learn the discipline to show up day after day to do the work, the confidence to put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there, even when the success you've expected to achieve has yet to be achieved. And on top of all this, you get a huge dose of personal initiative, which is the go-getter energy that moves any one of us, including yourself, to go and make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. And we put all this together into one bundle, one package, one mindset, one method, one philosophy, one book, one show, one daily masterclass. That's what you're listening to right now. It is called, all this is all under one umbrella, all called the same thing: work on your game. My name is Dre Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day, and the topic here today, this is a quote that I heard somebody say. Actually, I've heard many people say it, but I heard somebody say it recently and it sparked the idea for this episode. The quote is, "It is not my job to educate you." My rebuttal is, yes it is. It is your job to educate people. This is, actually, before I even get into explaining why I'm talking about this, let me remind you or inform you that I have a text number where I want you to text me and tell me most valuable insight you get from today's episode. What are you going to think or do or say differently based on what you heard today? My number is 305-384-6894. And if you're not going to think, do, or say anything different, and you disagree with what I said, you feel like I am off base, off point, my number, text me and let me know. 305-384-6894. All responses welcome. And the reason why I'm talking about this topic is because I see this comments. I see people using this statement often. Specifically, I've heard it a lot recently. And it's usually people say something like this when there's a very emotionally charged topic. Specifically, there have been a lot of people using it around the subject of race, around the subject of politics is another one, and sometimes those two get mixed in together. But people use this when they are introducing a topic that, to me, and I'm going to build my case here today for why I'm saying this, that there may not be a lot of substance behind what they're saying, at least when they're talking about it. Maybe there is some substance, but they don't have it. But they want their point to stick. So somebody will say, well, they'll say something, and you'll say, well, how do you know that that's true? Or what are your facts? What's your source behind making the statement that you're making? And a person will say, well, it's not my job to educate you on what these things are, or what this point is, or why what I'm saying is correct, or why you need to know about what I'm saying. So instead of admitting the truth, the person who is using this statement, instead of admitting the truth, which is, I can't explain my point, or I can't defend my point, people say things like, well, you can go look it up, or you can go Google it, or it's not my job to educate you. Now, I get people saying this in some flippant fashion when there's having some arguing about something that doesn't really matter. But I witnessed someone use this in a conversation that appeared to be a very serious conversation. It appeared to be a topic that this person who said it, they seemed to take this topic very seriously, and they went and threw out this statement, oh, it's not my job to educate you. And I knew that this person, as soon as they said that, I knew they were full of shit. And I knew where the conversation was going, and the answer is not anywhere from that point that they said that. So I appreciate that person, they know who they are, for the ammunition, for supplying me the idea for this topic. They didn't really supply the ammo, they supplied the idea. When they said it, it sparked a response in me, and I did say something back to this person. It was a conversation amongst multiple people, but this person basically showed that there was a lack of substance behind what they were saying, at least when it came to that individual person. Now, maybe there is some substance behind the bigger picture if someone else was explaining it, but they were incapable of explaining it. They were incapable of explaining what they were saying, or incapable of standing on what they were saying, incapable of defending what the idea that they had thrown into the conversation. And when someone asked them, okay, well, what do you mean by that? What are you saying? Can you explain what you're talking about when you say this? And they use this escape clause of, oh, it's not my job to educate you on the point. So again, there's a way that you can make your point and people have to, quote unquote, have to agree with what you're saying. But at the same time, you don't have to defend it. You don't have to offer any supporting points or facts to it. And people are supposed to just accept it. And I see people doing this a little bit too often. And it was enough that led to this episode right here. So you can thank those people for their bullshit for leading to this point. So let's get right into it. The topic, once again, is, it is not my job to educate you. I say, yes, it is your job to educate people if you're bringing up a point. Number one, if you introduce a topic for any reason, in any way, shape, or form, if you are the one who introduces that topic to a conversation, whether that means you said something, or you are advertising that point, whatever it is 100% your job to educate people on that topic because you're the one who made people pay attention to it in the first place. And actually, the way that I look at it is you should be happy when somebody's asking you a question about something that you brought to their attention. Because number one, you now have the opening, because they're asking you, to educate them. You can tell them what they need to know and tell them everything that you know about that topic. And number two, by doing that, you now know that you know what you're talking about. The more you talk about a topic, the better you get at explaining it, the better you get at articulating it, the better you get at handling any objections or questions. You start to learn what are the FAQ, the frequently asked questions around that topic. The more you talk about it, the more you get to practice, the more you get to work on your game so that the next time somebody asks you, you already know what questions they're going to ask. You already know what objections they may have. You already know what they might be thinking, even when they're not saying it. So you should be happy when somebody is asking you, whether directly or indirectly, to educate them on a specific subject. I'll give you a simple example. I wear a hat all the time. I'm wearing a hat right now that says work on your game. This one says work on your fucking game. But if I'm wearing a hat that says work on your game, I'll wear a t-shirt that says work on your game, or anything that is I'm clearly advertising something. And someone sees me wearing a hat. They look at me. I see people doing this all the time. I think they're looking in my eyes, but they're looking at my hat. And they ask me, well, what's that? What's work on your game? Or what's work on your fucking game? Usually nobody asks me what is it, but they'll see it and they'll say, oh, work on your game. I like that. That's good. I have people say that all the time. If somebody asks me what it is, could I say to them, hey, there are books that you can go read on the subject. And that is literally true. There is a book called Work on Your Game that I wrote, and they can go read the book and they would know exactly what work on your game is. Would I say that to a person in the street who sees me in line at the grocery store? Hey, go get the book. It's not my job to educate you on what work on your game is. Would that make any sense for me to say that? Would it make sense for me to say that? Well, Google it. It's not my job to give you all the information on what work on your game is. And that was a very sarcastic example, granted, but understand the point that I'm making. When I wear a hat that says work on your game, what am I doing when I'm wearing that hat? I'm advertising that phrase, work on your game. And at the same time, since I'm the one wearing the hat, I'm asking you to pay attention to it. Because when you look in my face, you're going to look at the hat. And when you look at the hat, you're going to see that phrase, and it's going to hopefully get your attention. I'm asking you for your attention. I'm asking you to notice that it says work on your game. All right. And because I'm doing that, it is now, through this, my responsibility to answer a question that you might have about it, because I'm the one walking around with it. Now, if I didn't have the hat on and you walk up to me and say, hey, I heard about this thing on the internet called work on your game. I just want to stop you random man in the street. Maybe you would be able to tell me what it is. Now, then I could say, and I would have a leg to stand on, I could say, hey, is that my job to educate you on what that is? What do I have to do with that? Why are you asking me? Why am I the person who needs to answer that question? I don't know. I'm not qualified to speak on it. I don't feel like speaking on it. And I didn't do anything to get your attention to it, at least through me. So it ain't my job to answer that question. But if I'm walking around with the hat on, then of course it's my job, because I brought it up. So if somebody notices that this hat says work on your game, I signed up for the job of talking about it. It's the same as if you have a tattoo on your face. You get a tattoo on your face, you can't be mad when everybody's staring at your face because you put the tattoo on there. If you make a statement, you're in a conversation with someone, no matter what the subject, and you make a statement of fact or a statement of truth, and someone questions your statement, such as saying, hey, how do you know that that's true? Or how do you know that that's a fact? Or what is the source of your information? Or you're saying that people need to understand this thing, and this thing. Can you explain to me or to us how you know these things to be accurate when nobody else knows about them? And this is exactly what happened in the situation that I'm referring to that sparked the idea for today's topic. Someone made a statement. They made a statement as a statement of fact/truth. There's a little bit of both. And someone asked the question and said, well, can you elaborate on that? Can you explain a little bit more what you mean and what you're talking about? And this person escaped the conversation by saying, it is not my job to educate you on these points. And I rebutted to this person, hey, well, it is your job, because the only reason we are talking about it, the only reason it even got brought into the conversation is because you brought it up. So of course it's your job to talk about it, because that's the only reason it's even in the conversation right now. We only went this direction because you said something. So stand on what the hell you said. when you call for attention by speaking on something, you can't hang up the phone. All right, if someone asks you about something that you said, you have asked them to notice it because you said it. All right, if you don't want attention for something that you say, don't say it. If you don't want attention for something that you did, don't do it. But once you've done it, it is now it's open season. You have given that statement or that action to the world, and the world can use that statement with you. They can use it against you. But they can ask you about it because you did it. All right, you made the statement. You can't be mad at people for bringing it up, no matter how long ago it was, no matter whether you think it was. Maybe you think people are bringing it up the wrong way. Maybe you can learn to laugh it off. You can learn to deflect it, whatever you got to do. But if you did it or you said it, then people are going to bring it up because you put it out there into the world, and you have to own that. Maybe you don't like the fact that people are bringing it up. You can go ahead not liking it, but to escape the conversation or to escape the question by saying, well, it's not my job to educate you. Well, you made it your job to bring it up in the first place, so now you got the whole job. All right, so the job is not just the parts of the work that you like, it's the parts of the work that you may not like either. So I made it my job to put out this show called Work on Your Game. And I've talked about many topics in which not everybody agrees with me. But the fact that I put these out there means one day somebody may bring up something that I said on this show a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and they may say, well, on this episode, you said this, and I disagree with it. Can we address that? I can't say to them, it's not my job to educate you on that. I can't say to them, I don't want to talk about that. I could technically say I want to talk about it. I wouldn't want to say, let's put it that way, that I don't want to talk about it. And I wouldn't want to say something like, well, it's old. You're bringing up old stuff. Stop living in the past. Listen, I brought it up. If I didn't want people to bring it up to me, then I shouldn't have brought it up to them and put it out there in the first place. So I got to stand on it. Even if someone takes it out of context and tries to make it look different than it actually was, I will even point that out, but I'm not going to escape the conversation. I'm not going to try to avoid the conversation by acting like I didn't say it, like acting like it didn't come out and it wasn't put out there. I will address, hey, you took that out of context. Hey, that's not exactly what it was. Or you're making this look different than it was. I'll even say that, but I'm not going to escape the conversation. Moving on to point number 2. Today's topic, once again, it is not my job to educate you. The answer is yes, it is your job to educate people when you have introduced the subject. Number 2, you don't want to talk about something, don't bring it up. I mean, as I said in point number 1, I stepped on this in point number 1. When someone brings up a point, especially usually this is coming up when someone is, this is an emotionally charged topic. Usually people don't say this when they're talking about something like they think this football team's better than that football team, or like these kind of chicken wing sauce over this kind of chicken wing sauce. Usually nobody says anything like, it's not my job to educate you when someone asks them about that. Usually it's something that someone's really emotionally engaged in. Maybe they're trying to regulate their emotions. Maybe they're trying to not get into an argument. Maybe they just don't want to be questioned or challenged. I think most of the time it's the latter. They don't want to be questioned or challenged in the situation, but hey, you brought it up. So now you got to own it. Once it's out there in the world, it's out there. Now, obviously, since you said what you said, you have something to say. So since you spoke on it, you stand on it. Now, a lot of times in life, people will repeat talking points that they have heard through media, social media, news media, whatever media. And they know that these talking points are popular, so they repeat them because they heard somebody else say it. But when you challenge them and ask them to defend these talking points under scrutiny, meaning you are questioning them or you're rebutting them or you're saying, well, that's not technically true. What about this part right here? A lot of times same people who will repeat talking points that they heard on the news or they heard some well-known person on the internet say, they can't defend these talking points. They can only repeat them, but they can't defend them. Today, again, the big talking points are things around race, politics. I guess you could even say the pandemic. Those are big ones where people do this. Yesterday, it was really a politics thing. I mean, when I say yesterday, I mean just in the recent past. Tomorrow, it will be something different. The issue with doing this is people getting their talking points from other individuals. They get their talking points from what they see as popular and what is being accepted in a widespread way. The problem is, wherever you get those talking points from or whomever you get those talking points from, they're not giving you the full story anymore. Or they're only giving you part of it. They're giving you the part that you can remember and the part that you can write down and the part that you can repeat, but they're not giving you the context, which means if and when you are challenged on these points, you don't have a leg to stand on because all you know is the talking points, but you have no idea of the substance underneath them or if any substance exists. There may be a complete lack of substance, but you don't know that because all you did was repeat the talking points. So when you run into someone who may have more information than you, someone who has more context than you, or someone who is willing to challenge you on these points that you are repeating that you heard from somebody else, you may be the one who ends up getting embarrassed because you can't defend yourself, called out because someone is asking you to stand on these points and you're incapable of doing so, or red pilled, as they say, because someone then smacks you upside the head with some truth, or punches you in the face with some truth, or with some information that you otherwise didn't even know. And now you're the one who looks like an idiot because the news or the media or the social media person that you were following, they didn't give you all this context. They only gave you the talking points, and now you realize that the talking point didn't have much underneath it. It was built on sand. And then when that wave comes in, when the tide comes in, all right, your house is the one that gets blown over. All right, this is what happens with people when they're saying, it's not my job to educate you. Well, it's your job to educate yourself, would it not be? Since it is your job to educate yourself, if you're going to go around, this is for everybody, if you're going to go around speaking on things, make sure you're speaking on things that you can defend. Make sure you're staying in a lane that you can drive in. So if and when someone does challenge you on what you say, you can defend it and say, okay, the reason I said that is because this, and this. And if there's something that you don't know or something that you feel you are unqualified to speak on, don't speak on it. Just leave it. And there are many times here on this show, just recently, I did an episode on police reform, and I said, listen, I'm not talking about specific reforming of the police or the laws or how the cops are trained or anything like that, or whether they should have a gun or not. I'm not qualified to speak on those things. And those are not the things that I really care about that much anyway. I'm going to speak about this from a different angle, a more practical angle of how we deal with them as civilians. And those are the things that I am qualified to speak on because I know how to talk about that. I can't talk to you about the legislation of how they train cops and whether they should have a gun or not and things like that. And even if I could, I'm not interested in that. If I was interested, then I would find out about it. But since I'm not interested, I'm not finding out. And you might think, well, Dre, why are you not interested? Because I'm not going to be dealing with any cops. So I don't care whether they got a gun or not, because I'm not going to do anything that's going to cause them to think about the gun. But that's just me. I did a whole episode on that for you to understand from my perspective. So this is what I mean when you're saying, well, it's not my job to educate you on something. It's your job to educate yourself. So if you're not educated, that'll explain why you don't want to talk to anybody else about it. Again, this is an escape clause statement that people are using to avoid a conversation that they are unqualified and unprepared to have. Point number 3. Today's topic, once again, is not my job to educate you. Yes, it is. Number 3, when someone's using this phrase, as I just said, I kind of said this in point number 1 as well. It's an escape clause. They want to make a point. They want you to accept their point, but then they don't want to have to defend or stand on their point. And they don't want to have to prove that there's any substance behind the point. So it's actually a really good tactic that people can use against you if it goes unchallenged. This tactic is very effective when unchallenged. Now, when the tactic is challenged, then it completely falls apart. So this is kind of like an all or nothing proposition. It's kind of like a baseball player. The pitch gets thrown to them and they swing for the fences. They're either going to get a home run or they're going to strike out. One or the other, but there's no in between. Okay, this is what happens when you use this phrase. If you say it and everybody accepts that you don't have to educate them, then it's a home run. But if you say it and somebody says, well, yeah, it is your job to educate because you're the one who brought it up, and then there's no substance, and oftentimes there isn't, now you struck out. Now you're like an idiot, and now you're embarrassed, which is what happens, and I've seen it happen to many people. Same as someone claiming, for example, they just say, well, hey, they claim something as a fact. And any of you who's ever seen people arguing or debating about something, they state something as a truth, or they quote the Bible. They're throwing out some statistic that is unverifiable, and somebody's asking them, all right, where'd you get that statistic? Where's the source? Can you prove that thing that you just said? And they'll say something like, well, you can look it up, or you can Google it. All right, that's bullshit. All right, the burden of proof for a statement is on the person who said it. So the next time you get in a debate with someone and they're claiming some type of factual information, keep this in mind. Whoever says it has to prove it. All right, it is not on the listener to verify your facts. If you state something as a truth or a fact, you have to prove it. If you can't prove it, then it's inadmissible to the conversation. Let's borrow some legal language. You said it, you prove it. Unfortunately, there are a lot of scared people out there when it comes to certain hot button topics. As I said, usually I hear this phrase on a hot button issue, something that people are really emotionally engaged in. So since there's so many scared people out there, they allow this shit to perpetuate. So someone's talking about race and they say, well, it's not my job to educate you about race. The people who are afraid to challenge them won't say anything, and that statement gets to stand. And thus it becomes a home run for that individual. But when they get challenged, because there are some people in there who ain't scared, All right, it doesn't perpetuate, and now again, everybody finds out the emperor has no clothes. The more often it happens, the more people feel that they don't need to stand on their statements. So when people throw out this thing, not my job to educate you, they just keep using that. They never have to stand on anything that they say. They're never being challenged, or they won't put themselves in the position in which they know they would be challenged. So they can just keep throwing that out and escaping any conversation in which they would be challenged, and to the point that they basically indoctrinate themselves that what they're saying is actually true, because they keep repeating it. It's never been knocked down because they won't converse with anybody who might knock it down. You understand what I'm saying? Why it's been so hard for me to get anybody who may have different opinions from me to come on this show, because they know I'm not going to just accept their bullshit. And those people know who they are too, because I've had conversations with them. They know who they are. So what I'm saying here is, if you believe something, you should be happy to discuss it. You should be happy to educate others on it. You should be happy when people offer rebuttals to the thing that you believe. You should be happy when people have questions about the thing that you believe. You should be happy when the same questions keep coming up over and over again, and the same challenges keep coming up over and over again, because now you can build those into the thing that you're talking about, so that the next time you can preemptively answer the question before anybody asks you. You should be happy if you really believe something and somebody's challenging you, because it allows you to become even stronger in that point, even stronger in that idea. Why wouldn't you? If I tell you something such as, hey, there's no such thing as too much confidence, I'd be happy to tell you why. I'd be happy for you to tell me that I'm wrong, because I've talked about it enough. I've thought about it enough, and I want to hear your rebuttals to it, so that the next time I bring it up, I can handle that rebuttal before anybody else in the audience says it the next time. If I tell you that equality is impossible, challenge me. I'll tell you why it's impossible. I will defend my point of view to you. If I can't defend it, or I don't want to defend it, then I shouldn't have said it in the first place. All right, this is just the way that it works in life. You throw something out there, you got to stand on it. If you're not willing to stand on it, or you're not able to stand on it, and usually it's a combination of both, then your point was full of shit, and you basically hurt your credibility with any critically thinking person. And we got a couple episodes coming on critical thinking soon, in the very near future. Stay tuned. Let's recap today's class, which is this statement that people make. It is not my job to educate you. And my answer is, yes, it is your job. This is an escape comment defense mechanism that people are using when they're introducing a topic that contains very little substance, at least coming from that individual. So this is something that I saw happen in a recent group conversation. So thanks to that person for throwing this out there. And there's some people listening to this who know exactly who and what I'm talking about. Point number one, if you introduce a topic by speaking on or advertising it, it is 100% your job to educate. That's why you introduced it. You can educate people, and you will know that you got better at knowing what you're talking about. So if I wear a hat that says work on your game, I can't get mad at somebody for asking me what does work on your game mean, because I'm the one who advertised it and put it in their face in the first place. I asked for your attention. Now I got your attention. I called for it. Now I can't hang up. Point number two, you don't want to talk about something, don't bring it up. If you bring something up, you obviously have something to say. So if you spoke on it, so stand on it. All right, be an adult and stand on what you said. So often this is happening with hot button issues that people may be a little bit emotionally engaged in, which means they either want to stay from getting too emotional, or B, all of their points or all of their substance, or whatever you want to call substance, is emotional based, but is not logically and factual based. And they know if they go against someone who is more emotional and logical, more logical and factual than emotional, they're going to pull all their points apart, and then they will be exposed. And I think people don't want to nobody wants to be exposed in that way, so they use this escape clause to stay out of that conversation happening. Point number three, when someone uses this phrase, it's not my job to educate you, often it is a defense mechanism. They want to make a point, but they want you to accept it without them having to stand on it. They don't have to defend it. They don't have to explain it. They don't have to prove there's any substance underneath it. The same as somebody claiming something to be a fact, and you say, how do you know that's a fact? What's your source? And they say something like, look it up, when they in fact have never actually looked it up. The burden of proof for a statement is on the person who says it. If you make a statement, you have to prove it. All right, it's not on the job of the listener or the person you're talking to verify your facts. It is your job to verify it. And if you can't verify it, don't say it, because even though you may get away with that bullshit with some people who are not critical thinkers and or people who are not apt to challenge people verbally, when you do finally come across somebody who is a critical thinker and or who will challenge you verbally, and you try that bullshit and they call you on it, you're going to be the one who looks like an idiot. So just because you hit a few home runs with the sheep saying things like this. Don't think you're going to keep hitting the home runs when you go against somebody who's not going to let it go. And the more this happens, you talk to people who let you get away with that shit, the more you start to feel like you don't need to stand on anything. So you just start saying more and more stuff that is not backed up by anything. If you believe something, you should be happy to discuss it. That's the way that I see it. If I tell you there's no such thing as too much confidence, or I tell you that equality is impossible, I want you to challenge me. I want you to ask me why I think that, and I'll tell you why I think it. I'll tell you exactly what I think. And if you have a rebuttal to what I said there, then okay, we can just keep going with the conversation. I'm open to that. And the reason why I'm open to it is because I'm the one who put it out there in the first place. If I didn't want to discuss it, I should not have brought it up. This is just the way that it works. So I want you to text me. Tell me the most valuable insight you get from today's episode. My number is 305-384-6894. Once again, 305-384-6894. Work on your game. Dre all day.